Today I am making Guinness beef stew. Now my wife actually found this recipe, but it became an instant favorite in our house. Also, I will be testing this magnetic knife block from Tomidao, Tomidao, and this Dragon Creek chef's knife. It's an 8-inch chef's knife. It's got a design that I haven't seen before, nor have I tried. So we'll give it a shot and see what it's best for. And I have the Senvasfa ULU knife. Now, I've never used an ULU knife of any sort, but I thought it would be fun to try to mince the garlic. And as a backup, I've got my trusty Milk Street knife. I know that works. I use it all the time. I'm going to start with the vegetables just so I don't mess up the cutting board with the meat. I'll be using this Gallardo garlic peeler. I've had kind of a mixed success with this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think it depends on the type of garlic you have and maybe how old it is. I don't know. But sometimes it works really well. And so it's my first stop. I just throw it in there, just kind of roll it around. And hopefully it's doing its magic. Kind of. It kind of worked. Yeah, we'll put it in there a little bit more. Oh, that sounds good. That sounds like it's doing something. All right, that's a peeled garlic. One more. Now, I only need 2 teaspoons, and these bulbs are enormous, but I figure you can never have enough garlic. Peeled garlic. So the Gallardo worked perfectly this time. Well, more or less. Let's give the Senvasfa ULU knife a try. I don't know if you, yeah, well, I've never used one, so we'll see what happens. I think I'm supposed to be rocking back and forth, but I'm not quite at the stage where that makes sense. So we'll just do this. All right, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I need a bigger pile. I don't actually know that this is what it's for. It just seemed reasonable. Is it faster than a regular knife? Maybe. I think the smaller it is, the more you can get that rocking action in. I feel like I should have something under my cutting board so it doesn't slip so much. I don't know if I have a... Maybe, how about that? Oven mitt. Well, yeah, I think this is working. It might have been better for me to use just a regular chef's knife for the initial cuts and save this for the fine mince, but it worked, whatever. And This actually looks more like a generous tablespoon of garlic rather than 2 teaspoons, but if I mince it fine enough, I can probably get in just about anything. It's kind of fun. Yeah, smaller I make it, well, it might be less than a teaspoon now. No, it isn't. It is. This is still at least a tablespoon, but that's fine. It's just an extra teaspoon, right? All right. That looks good. I think I'll use a bench scraper to get this into my garlic cup here. Now the onion I'm going to try with this Dragon Creek chef's knife. It's got to be super sharp. I just opened it. Just pull out of the box. And it is very sharp. Now I need this to be diced, not minced. Pardon the dog, she's defending us from the scary neighbors. Her name is Indigo, by the way, if you've never met her on a different video. Why is her name Indigo? It's not a very interesting story. All right, so we're going to dice. This is cutting through this onion really well. It is having no problem. I've had other knives where the tip of the blade, it just doesn't seem well balanced, or it doesn't seem like it's well purposed for cutting onion or other vegetables. This one seems fine. So I think I still want to try this with the beef, but as far as cutting the vegetables goes, I think it's fine. I know I don't have the best knife skills, but we managed not to starve anyway. The old bench scraper out again. We do baking around here too sometimes. Been experimenting with sourdough lately. My wife does a lot of cookies. Ooh. This is a powerful onion. Try not to let my crying eyes make it a safety issue with this knife. Like to get as much out of the onion as possible. We love onion. Onion and garlic, the classic combination, right? Doesn't really give any guidelines on how far to mince the or to dice the onion, but looks good to me. I'll be using Petite Yukon Gold potatoes. I've rinsed them, but I haven't peeled them. The skins are thin and these are way too small. It would be maddening to peel these things. Once again, I'll be using the Dragon Creek chef's knife and cutting these into bite-sized pieces, which usually is, depending on the size of the potato, between 4 and 6 pieces. Well, maybe 8. I don't want any complaints. I encourage constructive criticism, and my wife is happy to comply. Plus, as smaller pieces cook faster. And I don't know if you can see the time, but it's already 6 o'clock almost. This stew is not going to be ready until maybe breakfast. Oh boy, it was a busy day. I get off work at 3, and I still, once I got my errands done and the kitchen cleaned up, I didn't even get started until 5. So, and you can't rush quality, right? This stew is worth waiting for. Oh, and well, the whole reason why I'm making the stew to begin with is because I made some sourdough baguettes, and I said, what can we have with baguettes? And my wife suggested the Guinness stew. I said, always a good idea. I'm probably cutting way too many potatoes. I'm only supposed to use 1 pound. I don't know how many. Let's get out the kitchen scale. Let's see. All right, zeroed out. Let's get this on pounds. Okay, so that's only 11 ounces. We'll keep cutting till we get to 16. I don't know how many were in the bag. I should have checked. If we're close, I'll just do them all, but all right, we're at 14 and a half, 15, ooh, 15.9. All right, so that's a pound. I have 7 left over. Should I cut them? I better not. Better not. My wife likes extra carrots. She never mentioned extra potatoes. I like the potatoes. Well, everybody likes potatoes, right? Next we have carrots. The recipe calls for 3 large carrots. I guess that's a judgment call, but let's see what we've got here. You never know. Well, yeah, that's a large carrot. These are big carrots in this bag. All right. Do we have another big one? Yeah, that's not that big. Well, maybe we'll do 4 carrots. Just so we have enough. The next step will be peeling the carrots. When I come back, the carrots will be magically peeled. Won't that be nice? And like magic, the carrots are peeled. Now we need to cut these into bite-sized pieces. Once again, I'll be using the Dragon Creek chef's knife. See how this works? I should have trimmed off the edges while I was here, or while I was off camera. But well, we'll do that now. Not everything needs to be Hollywood magic, right? These carrots are huge. All right, these are, I need these to be in bite-sized pieces. I think I will cut these in half before slicing them down farther. All right. I don't know if any knife would do well with this project. Although I could try the Nakuri. But this is doing well enough. I'll stick with this just to give it a fair shake. All right. Huh. I guess I needed 3 bowls. I have another bowl. Not to worry. Oh. I don't know if there's a better way to do this. Actually, the recipe says 2-inch pieces, but I know I know my wife will say something if I bring this to her in 2-inch pieces. Those aren't bite size. Oh, one for the dog. Will she eat it? She eat a carrot? Well, I guess so. There's not much she doesn't eat. I've seen her eat drywall, a phone charger, a shoe. What else? I don't know. She's had some stellar moments, I tell you. My wife was not happy about the shoe. We were finding evidence of that for days. Yeah, I'm not convinced that this is the proper tool for this, but I'm actually not sure that the Nakuri would be any better. I could try it. Well, yeah. The Nakuri works much better. Nakuri from Milk Street. I have a feeling the dragon will be better for the beef. The recipe calls for 3 pounds of boneless chuck roast. This is close enough. I will be cutting this into bite-sized pieces, removing as much fat as I can, and putting it on this paper towel to dry. The idea is to dry it as much as I can and then season it before we fry it. All right, just want to get a Just want to cut along the fat line so it's easier to trim. Oh yeah, this knife is working well for the beef. So it's probably meant for the beef more than the vegetables. Not surprising. But I had to try it, right? Just trimming off the fat, trying not to get too much of the meat. And I'm not trying to get rid of all the fat, but just the biggest chunks. Just trying to separate it where it wants to naturally come apart. The Guinness stew calls for 3 pounds of boneless chuck roast. I have already trimmed off most of the fat with the Dragon Creek chef's knife, and trimming meat was a far better experience than cutting those carrots. So I think that's what this knife is made for mostly. Now I need to cut this roast down into bite-sized pieces, and we're going to put it on this paper towel so it dries. Although it doesn't seem tremendously wet anyway, but just want to make sure. I've cut the beef into bite-sized pieces. I used the Dragon Creek chef's knife, and let me tell you, I wasn't that impressed. I have better knives for this. It wasn't bad. It was certainly better for meat than it was for vegetables. I will not guarantee that it was my own skills. Maybe I was using it wrong, but just from my experience, I have better knives. Next step is to generously salt and pepper the beef. This is kosher salt in here. It calls for a teaspoon, and I'm not measuring, so I want to be very generous. That looks good. When it comes to black pepper, I like freshly cracked, and the only tool for that job is the pepper cannon. I don't know where you can get it. I got it from Kickstarter. So you can set it to whatever size you want. This probably should be thinner. I'll pat it in. All right, generously salted and peppered. The next step is to sear the meat. I have my largest cast iron skillet. I added more or less 2 tablespoons of oil, and after this gets hot, I'm going to add the meat and sear it on both sides for about 3 minutes. The oil has a nice shimmer. I can smell it. I'm using olive oil. I just gave it the water test, and it's spitting back at me, so it's ready for the meat. We're not trying to cook the meat through at this point. We just want to sear it. I have tried searing this in the stew pot, but there just isn't enough surface area. And while it always tastes fantastic, you don't get a sear. And the recipe calls for a sear. So we're doing it in the skillet. Even with the large skillet, 3 pounds of chuck roast in this thing is pushing it when it comes to sear. So what I'm going to do is take it off the heat. It's browned. I wouldn't call it seared, but it is brown. And I'm thinking that the residual heat from the pan might finish it off to where we need to be. And we're going to move on to the next step. Now, this is when all that prep work will come in handy. Once you get started, things start to move quickly. So let's go ahead and put the onion into the pot with oil and cook that for about 5 minutes till it becomes translucent. Now, it doesn't say to do this, but I always like to salt my onion just because I heard that it helps it cook faster. I set a timer for 5 minutes just to give myself a general guideline. I may not let it go the entire time. Maybe I'll let it go longer. We'll just see how it goes. All right, it's just coming up on 5 minutes here. The onion is looking really good. Very well sauteed. So next I will add the garlic and saute that for another minute. You really don't want to go too long on the garlic because it will turn bitter if you cook it too long. All right, that seems about a minute. I am going to add a 1/4 cup of flour next. It doesn't say to put it through a sifter, but why not, right? Don't want any lumps. It says a paste is supposed to form, and it does. But you don't want it to burn to the bottom, so keep stirring. I'm going to remove it from the heat for just a second. I think the next step is to, add the Guinness. We'll give that a nice stir. Basically, we're just deglazing the pot at this point. Now, by not cooking the meat in this pot, I realize that there is no fond to pick up from the meat, but there wasn't any anyway. I mean, with the old method, because it wasn't searing. So I don't think we lost anything. Stir in the beef stock. It calls for 4 cups of beef stock. I use 2 cans, and that comes to 3 1/4 cup. So we'll add that first. And then I'm also adding some of my homemade turkey bone broth, just so it has some nice collagen in it. That ought to top off the 4 cups, and I think it's going to be amazing. All right, now we're just adding the stuff. Here are the carrots. The potatoes. Calls for a can of tomato paste, so I'm going to add that. And I'm also going to add some, I made some homemade pizza for lunch. I have some leftover homemade sauce. I'm just going to throw that in a pot just to get rid of it. I don't want to waste it, right? Just going to give it a quick stir so far. Just to incorporate that tomato paste a little more. It's smelling great, by the way. All right, I'm going to add the Worcestershire. How much do I? It's only like a tablespoon of Worcestershire. For some umami. Okay, and I also need a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. I think I used the dry side for the Worcestershire, so I'll use the wet side for the Italian seasoning. Life's an adventure, right? And it says to add 2 bay leaves. My wife doesn't like bay leaves, so I'm leaving that part out. Going to give it another stir. And we are ready to add the beef. I'm going to use this slotted spoon so I don't get any oil or anything in there. I'm left-handed, so this is awkward. And another stir. We'll cover it. turn down the, I think we turned down the heat. Yeah, we're going to simmer on low for 1.5 hours, which makes dinner closer to 8:30. How European of us. I'm going to occasionally stir the stew until the potatoes and the carrots are soft, and then it's time to eat. And we'll be enjoying this with some of that fantastic sourdough bread I mentioned. So we'll cut, and when we come back, everything will be done and maybe cleaned up. Maybe not. Well, the stew is finally ready, like 2 hours later. My wife already ate. She gave up on me. But I have to give it a try because I said I would. So. It's fantastic. I knew it would be. That's what makes it a family favorite. Thanks for stopping by.